Sai here. So my mom, she asked me to refinish this table of hers, and so I thought, well, I would just show you what I did. I started with 80 grit. I'm not sure what kind of wood the table is, and I didn't want to scratch it. We're thinking that it might be ash. So the 80 grit took the finish off really well. And oh hey, I found my Darwin Order shirt. It was lost in one of our moves, and then I found it on this last move, so yay! Then after I was done with the 80, I took 100 and went over it again. Then I took it outside and I started on the underside of it, just in case I didn't like the color of the stain. I noticed the first coat was looking pretty sparse, so I knew that I would need to add more coats to it. So I looked at the directions to see how long I needed to wait between coats.
Says to minimize the brush marks and bubbles after staining, tip off the surface by holding the brush at a 45-degree angle and lightly run the bristles over the entire length of the wood. Tip it off. Okay. I don't know what that means, but I know what running your bristles over at the top means, like that, right? I think that works.
I still don't know what they meant by tipping off, so I just brushed over it a little bit till I thought it looked okay. And continued like that until everything was covered with that first coat. And then I moved on to the legs, and I did two sides of the legs at first.
The recommendations say to rub it down with some steel wool between coats, and so I did that, and wow, I really like this stuff. Anyway, it's been drying enough now that I'm going to rub it down with steel wool again, and then I'm going to flip it over and do the other side.
I imagine the steel wool is like sandpaper, but I don't know. I just like the way it works with this stain. It just makes it feel really smooth. So, kind of like sandpaper, but not. I was really excited to put stain on the top surface. I got to thinking while I was doing this, when I was a little kid, I remember spilling fingernail polish remover on our dining room table. I was a kid, I don't remember how old I was, and I don't remember the consequences of doing that. Maybe the consequences were having to look at that spot for years and years after that. I don't know. So refinishing a table for my mom is almost something that I needed to do. So sorry about that dining room table there, Mom. I had forgotten about it until I started working on this table. Then back to the legs. I used the steel wool again, and I was ready to move on to putting the stain on the surfaces I hadn't done yet.
Well, I'm not sure what time it is. I think it's like 5 maybe. And I wanted to put another coat on the table, and I came out here and check out the sunset. Can you see it? Pretty.
So I grabbed the steel wool and my cyclone, and we rubbed it all down in the pretty sunset.
I think it might be too cold. Well, not now, but later, because last night was down in the 40s, maybe even in the 30s. And yeah, I think I should wait until tomorrow. So I'm just gonna sand with the wool and wait for tomorrow. Okay, it's the next day now, yay! And it feels like it's gonna rain, but rain's not in the forecast. So I'm gonna just put the stuff on it, and if it starts raining, I'm gonna put it in, but it's a 0% chance of rain, so we'll see.
The second coat always goes on so much quicker than the first. You can see Gibbs rolling around in the dust. He just loves that for some reason. Then back to the legs for a second coat over those last two sides.
All right, it's been 6 hours or so. It's 6:30 p.m. So I'm gonna just use the wool on it.
And this evening, I was correct with the time. So I used the steel wool and went over the table one last time. And it left a white haze over everything. So I used a shop rag and I wiped it down, and ooh, was I loving it.
Okay, I brought it all inside because just like yesterday that I thought, when I thought it was 5 o'clock, it was 7 o'clock, and right now it's 7 o'clock. And so I brought everything in since it's starting to cool down pretty good. And steel wool is really great for in between coats, but getting rid of the drips, I'm using 150 grit or 100 grit. 100 grit.
So I worked on taking off the drips, and I think that if the legs were standing up, it would just be better. So if I did this again, I would definitely get the legs to stand up somehow. Then I got to thinking about the stain that I let get onto the bolts on the legs, which attaches it to the table. And so how is my mom going to be able to put the nut on that holds that on there because it's all mucked up with stain? I tried to use some solvent to clean it off, but that didn't work. I didn't know what size of nut fit on there, and I didn't want to strip out the bolt by just trying different nuts, trying to clean it off. So I talked to husband about it. He had a solution. He used his nifty caliber and his chart, and he looked and saw what size we needed.
Right there, 1/4 20.
Luckily, we had just organized the shop, and we had a whole bunch of 1/4 20. So we cleaned off the bolts with the drill and the nut. Whew! I'm so happy that we cleaned those off. Next time, I'll remember to cover those up with some tape or something.
Go.
Thank you. Right. Hey.
And the table was done. So thanks for joining me, everybody. And here is the table in my mom's house. And we will see you next time. Bye! So stuff I learned while staining this table is steel wool is awesome stuff. I still don't know what it means to tip off the surface by holding the brush at a 45-degree angle, but it doesn't really matter. Let the stuff dry between coats as directed on the label. Apply multiple coats. When staining legs, make sure they're standing somehow to avoid lots of drips. And make sure to tape off or cover up the bolts on the legs. If you forget, then use a drill and a nut to clean them real well.